On July 2025, the Handala, a small civilian ship, sailed through the dark Mediterranean bound for Gaza. It carried not weapons but hope. Activists, journalists, and human rights advocates from 12 countries united to deliver aid. Their cargo, baby formula, medicine, food, simple necessities for Gaza's besieged people. The mission was risky. Previous flotillas had been attacked or seized, but the crew pressed on, determined. As they neared Gaza, 40 nautical miles from shore, their communications suddenly went dead. Cameras went dark. The Handala, once a beacon, was now isolated in the vast sea. The silence was ominous. The most dangerous part of their journey had begun. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition, which organized the mission, had already lost 2 ships that year, one disabled by a drone, another seized with high-profile activists aboard. Yet the Handala sailed on, a symbol of defiance against the blockade. The crew knew the risks, but believed their mission was worth it. They hoped the world was watching, even as they vanished from view. For them, this was more than a delivery. It was a stand against injustice. Alone in the darkness, they waited for what would come next. The fate of the Handala was about to become global news. The Handala's mission was clear: deliver humanitarian aid directly to Gaza, bypassing Israeli checkpoints. The supplies, infant formula, medicine, food, were desperately needed in the blockaded territory. On board were activists, journalists, and public figures like Christian Smalls and Huwaida Araf, hoping their presence would draw attention and offer protection. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition's goal was not just aid, but to challenge the legality and morality of the naval blockade. By sailing in international waters, they asserted the right to free navigation and protested what they saw as collective punishment of Gaza's 2 million residents. The voyage was civil disobedience on a global stage, meant to force a conversation about the blockade's human cost. Previous flotillas had faced violence and seizure, but the activists persisted, determined to break the silence around Gaza. For them, the Handala was a floating symbol of hope and resistance. They risked their freedom to demand change. The world's attention was their shield and their weapon. This was not just about aid, but about challenging a system they believed was unjust. The Handala sailed as a call to action. The Handala was intercepted at night. Activists say Israeli forces boarded violently, disabling cameras and communications to hide their actions. They claim the ship was seized in international waters, calling it an act of piracy against a peaceful mission. Israel's government insists the interception was legal, citing security concerns and the need to inspect all aid. Officials say the ship was a provocation and that all humanitarian supplies must go through official channels. The key dispute: the ship was stopped 40 nautical miles from Gaza in international waters. Human rights groups argue this violates maritime law. Israel claims the right to enforce its blockade beyond its borders. The activists were detained, the cargo confiscated, and the crew told they'd be deported. Lawyers were denied access to detainees, following a familiar pattern from past flotilla seizures. For the activists, detention is the price of protest. For Israel, it's standard security procedure. The world watched as 2 narratives clashed over one ship. The Gaza blockade began in 2007 after Hamas took control of the territory. Israel, with Egypt's support, says the blockade is vital to prevent weapons smuggling and protect its citizens. Officials point to regulated land crossings for aid, arguing flotillas are unnecessary provocations. Critics, including the UN and human rights groups, call the blockade collective punishment, illegal under international law. They say it devastates Gaza's economy, restricts food, medicine, and basic supplies, and traps over 2 million people in poverty. Fishermen are confined to shrinking waters, students and patients face travel bans, and the threat of famine looms. The blockade's human toll is immense, fueling despair and resentment. For Israel, it's a security measure. For critics, it's a humanitarian crisis. The Handala's mission was to challenge this reality and force the world to pay attention. The blockade remains one of the most contentious issues in the region. The ship's journey was a direct response to years of suffering in Gaza. The debate over security versus human rights continues. News of the Handala's seizure sparked global debate. Supporters organized protests and social media campaigns demanding the activists' release and highlighting Gaza's plight. Human rights groups condemned Israel's actions as violations of international law. Governments whose citizens were detained raised diplomatic concerns, while pro-Israel voices defended the blockade as necessary security. The incident reignited arguments over nonviolent resistance versus provocation, and security versus collective punishment. As the activists await deportation, the world is left to question, was this a brave stand or a reckless act? The fate of the Handala has once again turned attention to Gaza's suffering. What should happen next? The answer is up to us.